Drukhari. We'll get sued if we do those two things. You start off by saying,
I think you need to.
the dark kin. And then I go, Drukhari. Ah, ah.
I'm gonna pass on that.
All
We'll
right,
let
that's
somebody
cool.
other than that. But
We'll throw this in at the end as bloopers.
you can do whatever you want. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Grimdark Filthy Casuals podcast, episode 9, The Dark Kin. We will be reviewing the Drukhari codex. We're here today with Nick Powell, aka the Chicago Cowboy, the Archon himself.
Hello, hello. How we doing?
And myself, Brian B. Moy, here. And we are just going to be talking, all things from Komara. Komara? Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Kamora?
Komora?
Kamora.
Either way.
They probably say it in like Dawn of War, Soul War, or whatever it was called. It was the expansion that came out in like 2005, whatever. They probably say it in there, but I don't know anyone who's played that game. So
fair enough.
So it's a mystery.
Nick, tell us a little bit about your Drukhari army and how you got into playing the Dark Eldar.
So I've been playing Dark Eldar since they got the revamp back in 5th edition. It's been almost a decade now, probably about a decade. And something just drew me to them about the new model sculpts. They were one of the first armies, I think, that GW started utilizing a lot of like their newer CAD technology to build the sculpts versus sculpting them from scratch. And it showed. Like they were the most beautiful kits on the wall at the local store.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's when I got into them, and really more of like from the hobby perspective. And then once you start playing them, especially in 5th edition, like they did the army so much justice. And we'll talk about those parallels to this version of the codex, which I think they went back to that and outdid themselves. But you really felt like you were playing a raiding force on the tabletop, like the way that it moved, your speed, the damage you could inflict, but the positioning of the army, you had to play cagey a little. It was so rewarding to play well. And that's a high I've been chasing for a decade. And it really feels like you have that utility in those kinds of toolkits back in the tool belt.
I know you've been absolutely beaming about this book and really excited about getting them back on the table. What would you say is your favorite part about playing Drukhari?
I think in general, I think just the amount of speed that you have. I think it's the fastest army in 40K. I mean, Harlequins have speed too. I think they would probably match them a little bit. You've got units like Reavers that are moving almost 30 inches across the board.
Yeah, it's nasty.
It's just nasty. Like you can get where you need to go, and it's more about timing when you get there and in what numbers versus just like hitting like a sledgehammer or whatever. It's a scalpel army, right?
Right.
And I think they play the 9th edition missions really, really well, which is exciting too. So there's almost nothing about this book that I dislike other than the 10-point Reaver, which
we knew that was going away.
Printing issues, logistics, etc. I'm sure.
Hashtag editing game.
We won't get into that here, but
no, we won't touch on that. So for myself, I actually am late to get into Drukhari. I got into them actually by way of Ynnari, because back in early 8th edition, you could fill out a Ynnari battalion with 35-point Cavalite warriors mixed into your Craft World Ynnari type of army, and that's how I started building my Ynnari army. And then once they made it so you had to have separate Craft World Drukhari detachments, I really actually liked playing Drukhari. I went heavy into Cabal and then heavy into Coven.
Yeah.
So that's really been my style. And previously, I had a really nice list that was built around obviously Prophets of Flesh. I was one of those dirty players with 6 Talos, but also just tons of racks. I loved racks. I thought they were fantastic for the durability, the board control that they offered. And then obviously I would also sit behind with just your triple Ravager and some Razorwing jet fighters as well, just gunlining things. So owning the middle board and then gunlining things to death. And I enjoyed it. I don't think opponents really like playing against that list.
I think I know one opponent that liked that list, and I think he played Iron Hands.
Yeah,
Kevin, if
yeah.
you're listening, you know who you are.
That was yeah, the Brohammer Iron Hand list was the one that probably sent that. Actually, that was my first loss with that list, was against that Brohammer list. I
That's
swear I could have
crazy.
pulled it off. But yeah, so I really enjoyed playing. I love that durability. It just felt very hammer and anvil like. You just have this really durable presence in the midfield, and you hit like a ton of bricks with disintegrators. But then again, those were very obvious choices, which
Mhm.
I think we'll get. Well, that's probably a good segue. What are your first impressions of the book?
I think, yeah, I mean, to segue from that, I think one of my favorite things about the book, that one of the things that hit me first was that there isn't really like an obvious build, which is something that I love. Like I have 30 different lists in Battlescribe right now for Drukhari. Like there's so many things that you can play around with. And I really think that we have the same problem that Space Marines have, which is like there's almost no bad unit. You can find
Gosh, ain't that the truth?
you can find a place for any of these units in your list. Maybe not Razor Wing jet fighters, maybe.
Yeah,
Even then, like they do
you
some.
said doo doo.
That's fair. I did do that. But there's almost no bad unit in this list, right? In this codex, excuse me. So just the versatility, like no matter where the meta goes from here, we are going to have some kind of answer and some kind of play here, which is so exciting, right? Just as a collector of the army, I'm going to get to put models on the board that I haven't put on the board in a decade, and I'm going to continue to get to adjust my list and do that for the next foreseeable future. Hopefully through until 10th edition, because of what they've put in this book. So I think
Oh,
that's my
GW.
first impression. Is it feels like Drukhari again, or Dark Eldar as I still call them. It feels like 5th edition because they play like a raiding force. They're
Yeah,
a scalpel. They have every tool in the toolbox that you could want to win games of 9th edition, but you have to know how to handle them because they are made of glass.
absolutely.
It's back to that super rewarding play style of, if you pull off the victory, you're going to feel like maybe you got there by the skin of your teeth. But like that's almost kind of how the army can feel. And don't get me wrong, there are still things in this book that hit like a ton of bricks that are point and click. But it's the support around them and how you get them where you need them to go, what secondaries you're taking, that I think really
Right.
sort of those intricacies. So what's your take? What was your first impression?
Yeah, I mean, my when I first read through the book, because my obvious choices in Prophets of Flesh and the
Yeah.
Triple Ravager Spearhead and Razorwing Jetfires just didn't seem as good. I was a little underwhelmed at first, right? Because there wasn't like obvious choices, unlike the Necron book or the Death Guard book, right? Like you could immediately tell what was going to be good, what their play style was. And for me, when I went through it at first, it was like, man, there's a lot of stuff in here. And I didn't see the initial strength in it. I really didn't. And then it hit me. I started to look at this book less as like a pure Drukhari Dark Elder. It almost felt more like Craft Worlds, where, to your point, there's a tool for every job.
Yep.
Every unit is viable pretty much, and it serves a purpose. But that's exactly as you said, it's a scalpel. You have to bring the right unit mix, you have to have the right builds to handle the right situations. And then the more I got dug into it, I really liked it.
Oh yeah.
It feels very fluffy for a Dark Eldar type of army, though the list that I've been working on might be a little contrary to how Dark Eldar like to play his force as a raid, like a raiding force. Mine is more of like a slow moving flotilla type of deal, but I think it's a really strong book. Like you said, options and flexibility is fantastic. I will get over being sad about like unkillable
Yeah.
Talos and Rax and bringing them back, but there's a lot to like about this book.
You went through the same thing that some Necron players. I also played Necrons. And some of the Necron players online were bemoaning the book when it first came out too, because they were like, "I want to bring 18 destroyers and not
Right.
viable anymore." And you're in the same boat. You're like, "I want 9 Talos and 40 racks," and like, you can still do that. It's
Can.
probably not going to be as good as it was
Exactly.
because there's other tools that you need to use to kind of fill out
Right.
where those units now, I don't want to say are lacking, but are just sort of side graded, right?
It's
Um,
better for the game. I mean,
it is.
when everything is viable and you have to make decisions in what am I gonna
Exactly.
bring? I mean, there's so many viable builds. There's just like I can't even count them, but 38, 40 different builds that are all viable in my
Yeah.
opinion. And it's really what do you want to do and how do you want to play? And I guess we can go through that, but what do you feel like are some of the biggest changes? I know we talked about flexibility, we talked
Yeah,
about more diverse and engaging play. What do you feel are some of the
yeah.
biggest changes between eighth
Uh,
and
I
ninth?
really, I really like the synergies that they put into this book, right?
Yeah,
Like, just right up top, right? Some of my favorite lists that I'm building are real space raids, and I know there's some people out there that are still focusing on like double, triple patrol and stuff like that, and I think those are also really viable. But I love that they added in those extra layers of, hey, if you use a battalion or a brigade and you do this in like a mixed force, sort of like how thematically Drukhari and Dark Eldar have always sort of in the lore gone to war,
right.
you're going to get all these other bonuses. And I love that they did that, right? I think there's a lot
Absolutely.
there with now all of a sudden your Archon, he can't use Rid of the Living Muse to give Ravagers rerolls, but he can give it to Scourges, and you can sit 15 Haywire, excuse me, or Haywire, but I'm going Heat Lances pretty much all day. You can sit 15 Heat Lance
Bring
Scourges,
in the heat.
and they're going to get rerolls to wound. They're going to get some bonuses from him and stuff like that. So I think that's really good. Like your Archon can babysit Talos and give them rerolls,
That
right?
feels good.
Throw a Chronos in there for rerolls to wound. Like there's a lot that you can do with that. And there's a lot of interplay between, my Archon doesn't have to sit by Cabalite units. It can go sit with witches. It can go sit with blades.
Right.
It can go sit with covens, and vice versa. So I think they've opened up a lot of those options, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. I would agree with you. Like obviously the options is huge and synergies is great. I think one of the biggest changes for me, just thinking about it, is like character play.
Yeah.
There's not just one build of Archon that you're going to bring, and there's not just like the Vexator Mask Homunculus. Succubus, there are so many good ways to kit them out. Archon, so many good ways to kit them out. Homunculus has some amazing utility that can
Oh
be
yeah.
game-winning builds
Oh
when you build
yeah.
around it. I love that. I mean,
The
to me,
Hero
that
Hammer is
feels Hero
alive and
Hammer.
well in the
Exactly right.
Drukhari book, man.
You want to?
I want to bring 9 characters like every.
I know, right?
It's crazy.
You want to bring Draz, bring 2 or 3,
Raz, 1 or
smash
2
Succubus,
Archons,
2
1 or 2
Archons.
Succubus, a Hammy, like.
Oh man, and you know what? I think that's going to be very interesting for how Drukhari play because typically speaking, you'll have units and characters in, let's say, a raider, right? So you got to get through the vehicle, then you got to get through the transport or the units inside, but then you got these beat stick characters that
Yeah.
were going to punish you for 65 points or 60
Yeah.
points, or whatever, right? Like the economy that you're going to get out of some of those characters, I feel like you do have to lean into that a bit uh, with this army. On the flip side of that, I do think that they will be susceptible to some secondaries, and in playing
They definitely
Drukhari
will be, yeah.
effectively is going to require a lot of skill in how do you pick your secondaries, how do you play to mitigate your opponent's ability to get points off of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that it seems like it's going to be a sort of a high skill army in
Yeah.
order to play effectively. If you're not,
The
if you don't
floor
get it,
skill, the
yep,
skill floor, excuse me, is high.
it's going to be very high. Correct.
It is also one of those things like I also play White Scars, and like everybody has a Space Marine army, and it's great. I love that there's an army that anyone can basically pick up and start using and have some success because that's how you get more people into the game. But I would be lying if I didn't say it's fun to also play an army that not everyone can play well.
Right.
There's a satisfaction that goes,
Absolutely.
So it's exciting that we still have some of that a little bit. Now, there is some power in this book, and it is going to be approachable for any young Archon or Succubus or whatever who wants to start with Drukhari. Like there are going to be some things in this book that you can put into a list, and you're going to be better off than not. But there's, you're just going to have to get reps in to learn
Absolutely.
how to really unlock, the rest of the toolbox. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a rewarding way to play as well.
100%. I mean, you think about this book, it really does reward slow grow. Like if you want to play Crusade, there's so much great stuff about Crusade in there too.
It's great for Crusade.
We didn't even plan in our talk track to talk through Crusade stuff, which maybe that's a whole nother episode.
That could be a whole. I'm playing in 2 Crusades right now, and
God bless you.
I listen. At night, the kids go to bed. I got time. TTS is there. I'm just saying. 500-point games, 1,000-point games. They don't take that much time. But the army slaps. Yeah. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about play style and how you have gone into your list design. I know you've been playtesting quite a bit here over the last couple of weeks. Let's talk about where are you landing? Tell me about your play style. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the army really rewards playing a more cagey, very patient play
I
style.
like that word, patient.
It's a patient
Yeah.
style, very patient. And I think the more I dig into this book, the more I play, and the more I'm I've played a lot against sisters as well. There's a couple of really good sisters players in our community on Discord, and I think the army plays a lot like how a sisters army plays. You've got all these sort of MSU layers that are built up that are designed to basically take out the enemy objective holders to force them to cycle units up into the midboard.
Yep.
And then once they get close enough, you jump out with your Repentia, or in our case, witches, incubi, reavers, hellions, mandrakes. I could go on. There's a lot of different beast packs. There's a lot of different units you could use for that. But I feel like that's really how the army plays well: is sit back, take your herd the prey secondary to get those table quarter points. Late game, you can get line breaker, engage, but force your opponent to come to you to deny you the herd the prey points, to get on the primary, and then with our firepower, just keep cycling them off, right? And we're cheap enough that you can even sacrifice a unit here or there to prevent your opponent from scoring, because you know that late game with your speed, you're going to be able to clean up once there's not that much left, right? So I think that's really the play style that I'm leaning into with my list that I've been testing. And I think that there's a lot of value in that in 9th edition. I think that we've seen that the sort of overwhelming turn 1, turn 2 alpha strike damage doesn't really exist in this game anymore. It is very much about how can you last 5 full turns and score those secondaries, right? And so I think that's what I'm focusing on. What about you? I know you do tend to play more patient, more cagey. How would you describe it?
Yeah. So the way that I always like to look at a game of 40K, a competitive game of 40K, because I haven't been able to play a competitive game of 40K in a while, is how do I score 75 points?
Yeah.
85 if I painted all my models, right? A good game, if I can score 75 points, that usually puts you in a great position to succeed, right? So usually my game script is I want to just have 10 points. If I just get 40 points on the primary, what's going to get me 35 on the secondary? So I'm building around scramblers. I absolutely love herd the prey. That's one that really leans into the way that I like to play. So if I'm taking herd the prey, I'm forcing my opponent to come take table quarters, which basically means they've got to come to the board or else I'm getting points. And if they're coming to the board, that means the way that I like to play is I can bring the majority of my strength against isolated portions of my opponent's force to clear that off. And so I don't like to extend early. I like to consolidate my strength. Herd the prey kind of it forces them to make that decision. Do I want to deny these points or let them start accumulating points? Or do I need to go out and make a big play? And the way that I built my list is really come out, try to make that big play. I've got a lot of damage in dark technomancers, liquefier guns, a ton for mid-range, and then you've got a lot of counter assault and witches in incubi, and then some smash characters that can really punish you if you want to take the board early.
And the fight lasts. We have so
much fight lasts. Oh my god!
In this book, man. And couple that with I take a lot of Cult of Strife in my early lists, because I think that combination of the fight last from 3 MSU units of Incubi and from Draz and from an Archon with Ancient Evil, there's so much in there. Combo that with the fight first from Witches, and that's just a 1-2 punch that a lot of armies can't come back from. Once they make that big push into the midboard mid-game to say, this is all or nothing. Like I think about my White Scar list. If my White Scar list if I played it perfectly into a Dark Eldar army and they were able to get off those Tormentors and the Ancient Evil, there's nothing that I could do. They would blend through my units. It doesn't matter, right?
Oh, it's nasty.
It doesn't matter. It would be, they're so efficient for their points. So I think there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of play there for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about, if you want to walk through your list a little bit? You don't have to go through all the details, but let's talk about maybe some of the synergies that you've built around.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't we talk about some of the secondaries that we kind of touched on a little bit already. We both like herd the prey. We both like deploy scramblers. Let's talk at the high level. What does this codex do well from a secondary point? And then we'll talk about what are some secondaries that we might need to watch out for as far as, because I think we've taken that into account with ours. if you want to start.
Sure. So we talked about Herd the Prey. That's probably my favorite secondary here. I know people aren't crazy about it, but it really leads into the way I like to play Drukhari. If I'm not mistaken, Herd the Prey actually competes with like Line Breaker, Engage on all fronts, being the battlefield supremacy, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a tough choice to
That's
make, right?
correct.
Like
Yeah.
if you're going to be taking Herd the Prey, that means you're going to have to give up your speed to get those points on Engage or even Line Breaker, which we're really good at. But for me, it really leads into the style of play. Like I'd rather have my opponent take to the board first, and then I can react to that. I like to play a little bit more cagey, a little more conservative, try to force my opponent into making decisions that I want them to make so that I can capitalize on that. Herd the Prey does that for me. So that's one secondary I tend to build around. I always tend to build around deploy. And our book gives you so many ways to get deploy scramblers. Mandrakes are fantastic for that. I end up picking the Red Grief, the Cult of Red Grief, because of the ability to get back inside of transports, but also the oh gosh, what is it Swift Outflanking, if I'm not mistaken, the stratagem that allows you to just pick up a transport, put it somewhere else and
strategic
outflank.
reserves. Yeah.
And then you can get out with Murderous Descent for another CP. So if you needed to get 2 units out for a Line Breaker, or you needed to, just for whatever reason, there you go.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of ways to be able to score secondaries. And then I do think that Drukhari, we have the punch to be able to get one of those killing secondaries, whether it's bring it down, grind them down, thin the ranks, assassinate, whatever have you. I think we have the power to be able to do that pretty reliably. So the way that I built my list is usually around Herd the Prey. That won't always be the case, but it gives me the option for Herd the Prey, which is my primary. Still with the speed of the army, with lots of raiders. I do have quite a few venoms in my list as well, with poison tongue. I can get Engage on all fronts relatively easily as well. I have a pretty good amount of board control. I don't prefer to play that style, but if I need to against a list that isn't going to fall for that trap, I certainly can. So those are the secondaries that I like to build around right now. How about you? What are you thinking for yourself?
I agree. Like I rate Herd the Prey pretty highly, and I know there's a lot of people that aren't really talking about it that much, because there is so much speed in this book that it's like, well, obviously Line Breaker, try to flip your opponent's deployment zone, obviously Engage in all fronts. And I've built my list so that those are options, but I've also built it. I really like the idea of Herd the Prey. I like the idea of, again, trying to get somebody to come to me, or else I'm going to max that by turn 4.
Right.
Did I do that math right? No. I'm going to max that pretty easily, though, unless they come and push me out. Like
you can get 4,
you'll be on 12
corner, right?
You'll be on 12 points by turn 3 if your opponent doesn't come to you. So that's pretty good if you're aiming for 75 points.
Exactly right.
As there's a lot of stuff that your opponent can do to kind of interrupt your Engage, your Line Breaker. So again, it's matchup dependent, but I really like that secondary a lot.
And the other thing is the mitigation. You can get 8 pretty easily, right? You're gonna if you get 2 for 4 turns, that's 8. That's a pretty decent floor for a secondary. With that,
for sure,
you can max it pretty easily as well. So I mean, to me, that's almost a no-brainer.
Yeah. Like the variance there, the floor is high and the ceiling is higher. Like the variance
exactly right.
really supports that play style. I love deploy scramblers. Again, Mandrakes I think are super good for that. They're just, I think they're one of the best, sort of most, what's they had the best makeover, I guess you could say. Them and Hellions in the book. Just
Hellions got the glow up for sure.
Brother.
How many do you have again? Like 100?
I got 20 of them on my paint desk right here in front of me. And my good friend, Baron Sathanix over here.
Oh, here he goes.
Now he's just a Heliarch or whatever they're called. So, but he's there in spirit. But no, I think they had a great glow up, to use your words. And, I think they really do a lot of things for the army. They push back on enemy infiltrators, and obviously Space Marines have infiltrators and they have incursors and they do a lot of that stuff. Scouts, if people still use those, if they have the elite slots. But I think another big one is Cerberus Raiders in the Admech book. We saw a couple of data sheets leak this week, and they're getting some slight nerfs, but it looks like some of the weaponry is getting a lot better. Admech books looks like it's right around the corner, so I expect them to get a similar sort of boost in power that the other codexes in 9th have gotten, which means that they may be a very popular choice still, which means we're going to need some protection against that kind of stuff. I think Mandrakes do that well. Their built-in ability to essentially use the Phobos stratagem from Space Marines, the name escapes me, guerrilla tactics.
Yeah.
Just bam off the table and come back on in strategic reserves is huge. It's huge for line breaker. It's huge for engage. It's huge for deploy scramblers. Like it's basically
Right.
a take. And then again, I agree. Like I built my list, the list that we're going to talk about. I built it around the idea that assassinate can be an option for them as well. I leaned into Dark Creed for the Coven pieces of my list, and I do have a 2 Talos unit with heat lances. I do have a hex rifle on my rack squad, just to give me the opportunity that 3 CP, it's pricey, but if I can get 4 heat lances in range of a character and get in there, like I'm going to try to pop that early. It also opens up opportunities for I forget what the second. I think cut off the head is the name of the secondary. It's a secondary no one takes.
Right, the warlord one.
Yeah.
Kill the warlord first turn, you get max.
You get 13 or 13, something like that. But like with 4 heat lances that can snipe characters, if they're not careful, you can maybe get some play in there, right? So it's again the idea of these things that can
only you would take that though.
I know. But hey, the one time it works would be worth it.
Money.
But I think there's options there, right? So I agree. I think some of the killing secondaries, we can definitely do some damage. We have a lot of high damage, high attack units. So if we're playing a cagey game, if there's relevant terrain, good enough terrain on the board, and you can hide a little bit, there's some obscuring. I think grind them down is an okay play against certain matchups. But they compete very, very well in the secondary game.
One thing you talked about on Mandrakes, I'm going to go back to Mandrakes really quick. I believe their From Out of the Shadows ability is like the old like forward deploy. So you can actually deploy anywhere 9 inches away during the deployment. Like the infiltrators, I guess, is what they used to call it, and that is an incredibly powerful ability. We saw that go away in 8th edition, right? Like most things, they just took that ability away outside of like Nurglings and obviously like some of the Phobos units. But we're not talking about like the ability to have like 1 or 2 units of Mandrakes forward deployed to take the board away from like Raven Guard or any other thing that wants the board right away.
Oh, exactly.
Can put your opponent on the back foot. So there's going to be times where you may think about, I need to trade this unit out, but the advantage that I'm going to get from a positioning standpoint is going to be worth they're not the cheapest squad, but
they're not bad. 75
points. Yeah,
it's a bunch of 1/1 T3 models. So like
to knock your opponent off their game plan, it could be very big.
And it plays into Prey the Herd. I have 2 toddlers, guys. My brain Herd the Prey,
right?
Because you're going to put Mandrakes on the middle objectives immediately, and you've got Herd the Prey, which says don't get into these 2 table quarters or I get points. So your opponent's going to say, well, we'll see about that, and go and try to push those Mandrakes off and try to get into those table quarters because they're going to be rewarded doubly so for it, or so they think. And then,
boom,
you counter them and
got them
on the board.
Pray they don't take you alive.
And then fire and fade back, or never stopping, or whatever it's called now.
Oh gosh, yes. What is that called? Jeez,
never stand still, or something like that. But
so that means if I really wanted to now, and I suit Drukhari with Harlequins, I can fire and fade and never stop moving, or whatever it's called.
But I don't think you actually. So I will. It's a different podcast, but I think I don't know if you get the stratagems if you go Ynnari because you're not a Drukhari detachment.
No, absolutely. I mean, like if you just went. Or Harlequins, right? And then you just went Drukhari, 2 detachments if you wanted to. But
yeah,
I actually am really sad about
that. Actually, you were 100% right.
Right, you can fire and fade and
stratagems. So you definitely
maybe there's some jank there to be had.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, go get your Soulstone, Shadow Seer, and all the -1 to wound, and then
Doom applying to everything too.
Yeah.
Right. I am sad a little bit about oh goodness, what is the Ynnari? So the weakling kin, I think. I used to love when like you have MSU and a Venom, throw it up in your opponent, they kill the Venom. Oh great, boom, Yinkarn comes down. What are you going to do now? He's just going to heroically intervene into you. And I mean, the Yinkarn was great in that type of list where you just have tons of Venoms, ton of MSU Cabalite warriors just dying all over the place. And he's just popping out and just wrecking face.
And you have a phenomenal conversion of 1/2, and it's got the spear from Is that Alariel's spear
Yep.
from AOS?
Yeah.
Gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
It's been my
And
favorite
it'll
model to
never
play.
be on the board again.
Yeah, not with my Drukhari list anyway.
Not until they get their own codex and a whole slew of new models.
GW, please. But no, it's in my Harley list and will be in every Craft World list as well that I play. But anyway, back to Drukhari. So any other secondaries, that you build around?
I think those are the main ones, and I think the third one that I'll pick is usually going to be dependent on my opponent, right?
Right.
I think there's some play. I mean, any army, depending on the map, I think there's definitely going to be some play with like raise the banners.
Yep.
I think that there's some pieces in this list that can even do things like the teleport Homer or whatever. The one,
Mm-hmm.
The one I'm talking about.
Yep.
That might be the name of it, but I hope you guys know what I mean. You don't see those taken all that much, but I think there's a lot of play there. Some of the mission secondaries are decent as well. I think the army absolutely plays well with vital intelligence or data intercept is the secondary from that mission. So I think I always like to leave that third one. There's a lot of options, right? And I think I've been talking about this a lot online, but you build the list knowing that those are the options. Like you don't want to go in and say, I built this list and the third one's a question mark. The third one's a flowchart, right?
Right.
Here's the two I'm definitely taking. This one is, what's the opponent, what's the mission, what's the terrain, how many objectives, blah, 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 blah. And you have to, I think we've talked about all the ones that you can kind of throw in there pretty realistically based on the matchup.
Right. So let's talk about what's going to make or break a great Archon versus somebody who's going to be the next rack. Picking secondaries against Drukhari. I think this is definitely an area that we need to be very careful about because a lot of our builds are going to give up.
They're going to give up a lot of points. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you go first. What are you thinking there?
I think right off the bat, because it's an MSU play style that I think we're primarily looking at least the list that you and I are putting together. Grind them down is obviously going to be a big. It's something that opponents could definitely take and capitalize on, depending on, especially if you're playing KG early and they can kill that one Mandrake unit, or pick off a Venom, which is still only T5. Like then they're going to get that one kill and they're going to get some of those points. With your flotilla and I'm taking 6 Raiders, like bring it down is, they're not going to max it anymore because of the changes in January, but it's still a very solid secondary to take against.
Well, you take 6, you're bringing 6 Raiders and 2 Talos and currently, right. I mean, that's, it's a lot of wounds you got to chew through, obviously, but yeah, I mean, you could potentially give up a lot.
And it could be a trap too, right? Because if I'm hiding stuff and playing cage, then you're not getting to it. So maybe you force yourself out into the mid board and overextend too early to get those points. And then I counter. There's a lot of play there again, but I bring it down to a big one. Assassinate, because we're playing Hero Hammer again. Like there's a single list in my battle scribe that I think has less than 4 characters. I think 4 is the minimum I'm taking in every list.
That's the number that I'm trying to keep it around. That's 4 characters. You're probably thinking the same 4 that I'm thinking. The auto include Archon, the auto include Draz, the auto include Succubus.
Amy, Succubus, yeah. Cryptic Whip, Ancient Evil, Jin Blade, Fixator Mask.
Yeah, so I mean that's obviously when we think about the list, and frankly, the way that we almost have to think about it is sort of like the playing chess, not checkers. If I'm going to bring 4 or 5 characters, maybe I need to think about, I want to bait my opponent into taking that, but I'm actually going to be a lot more conservative. One of the things that I've always liked, especially in Harlequin's list, like the Solitaire, characters with movement become so much more valuable in the mid to late game when the board there's less stuff on the board and they can move to where they want to move, clear out certain things, and there's not as much that can get back to them in order to take them out. And that's one of the things that I can see, especially with the Drukhari list, is you can keep your Archon back to provide some buff support, right? Or support for your units. You can keep your Succubus in. I know you're going to want to throw it out in front turn 1 and just watch it blend stuff. Same thing with Draz.
That's a rookie move.
It's a rookie move, right? But if you can keep your characters just behind a little bit instead of throwing them turn 2. Maybe you wait till turn 3. By the time that they come into you, your characters are now doing more counter assaulting. And then once you clear that out, oh my God, they can just blend anything out. Exactly. So I do think there's some opportunities there for like that mind game. Bring it down could be a trap. Assassinate could be a trap, and you're going to have to play that way, just like a good Archon, right?
Exactly. There's nothing more Dark Eldar than being like, these are the secondaries I think you should take against me.
And right. Take engage all fronts.
They're like, is they're like, I feel like I want to take Bring It Down, but they're looking at you, and you like there's mind games that's at play where it's like,
Right.
yeah, most of my opponents take Bring It Down, and then you watch them sweat like, should I do that?
Yeah.
The trap? Should I do that? So I think there's a lot of fun there. Another one I think is thin their ranks, and it's just someone that
Yep.
everyone looks at the secondary and they go, oh, that's for if you're facing 200 gaunts or whatever, right? Then you're going to max that depending on how much shooting you have. But you also get a point for the way it works out is I think it's so silly how it's worded, right? Because it's like add up a point for every model you kill, or 10 points if you kill a vehicle or monster with X amount of wounds, whatever.
And then you get a
and then you divide it by 10. And it's like,
right.
Well, can
You're
you
gonna make me do math?
Can you just say for every 10 models you kill, you get a point? For every vehicle you kill, you get a point? Like that would be, regardless. It's a similar thing with grind or Bring It Down. They stack really well. If you're bringing 4 or 5 raiders, you're bringing Talos, you're bringing Ravagers, you're bringing Venoms, like they're going to score 8 to 9 points on thin their ranks, which again, as we've said, like 8 to 12 is kind of where we're aiming on secondaries to make sure that we're winning the game, assuming 40 primaries. They're going to get 9 to 10 on that, in addition to the 13 to, or whatever it is, 12 to 14 they're going to get on Bring It Down if those models are dead, right? So, it can definitely sink the game fast, depending on, again, mission terrain.
Right.
So we've got to be aware of that kind of stuff.
And that's why I think, the immediate obvious playstyle for Drukhari is get in their face, get your Reavers, get your Hellions up there, turn 1, start eviscerating people, right? Like start charging out of transports turn 2 when you got advance and charge, all that good stuff, right? But I do feel that that's a little bit of a trap. I don't think we can win the war of attrition in a lot of these matchups that we're going to be playing against, and that's when you're just giving secondaries away to your opponent. I think the way for, at least the way that I'm planning on playing it, is I'm trying to force my opponent to, like, hey, they're not going to get points, and if they want to take points away from me, they got to move into my kill zone, right?
Yep.
So I'm happy to play patient. I'm happy because I know I won't win the war of attrition in most matchups. So I have to do some good damage. I have to find ways to isolate them early on and then pick my time for when I want to commit to portions of the board or certain objectives. So if my game script is I'm going to only get 10, 10, 10, and then maybe a 15 on turn 5 using my speed, and then just trying to make sure I get my scramblers, get 8 to 12, herd the prey, and then try to get another 10 points on another secondary. That game script feels very good to me, as opposed to fling everything up front, try to kill as much stuff as you can, jump out to a big lead, and then pray to God that you can hold on to that lead before you have nothing left on the board.
And you're seeing people try to throw lists together. Like I'm seeing on the competitive subreddit, there are people throwing it out there where they're like, I've got 60 witches and 12, 24 reavers, and they're going for massive turn 1 damage. And like,
sure,
that's a gatekeeper list in my mind. Like, and I don't mean any offense by that. Like that could be a lot of fun for you if that's your play style. That's great. I don't think that's a list that's going to win any GTs or majors. It might win a local RTT. It might be fun for you to play, and ultimately, that's kind of what matters. So fine. But that's not the way that I think this army really shines, right? So
I completely agree.
Yeah,
completely agree.
What about you? Are there any secondaries you think we missed as far as kind of painting a target on our back as Drukhari that are kind of obvious?
I mean, so maybe not secondaries that we missed, but I love the ability for us to the homunculus can just take away actions, right? Like you can take away actions, you can take away obsec. So deploy scramblers, which most competitive players build around. You can deny that pretty easily. Like if you can you can build like a denial list and deny them 10 points. That is a huge leg up on a game. So I mean that in of itself is worth its weight in gold, right?
It's one of those things where I don't know if I love it for deploy, but you're right, for a lot of different actions, right? Because deploy, if I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong and just blanking because again I have toddlers, but it's at the end of the player turn is when
right.
So if they pop their unit out and on that turn and they deploy a scrambler, you're not going to stop it from doing that. But there's a lot of actions. Most actions I would argue are, hey, at the end of your next command phase.
Exactly right.
Battle round, like if it's 5th battle round, end of 5th battle round, and then absolutely you're gonna be knocking off sec off. You're gonna be knocking off actions. It's great.
And that's unique.
Yeah.
As far as I mean, that's one of the few
There's
abilities
I
that I've
think
seen that can do that.
terror troops or terror tactics, whatever it's called. There's a stratagem that
Right,
like
right.
can use in Space Marines that does that. But yeah, like that's one of the classic plays in Space Marines is get like a Reaver Lieutenant, give it rights of war so it has OBSEC, then push it up onto something and then deny the enemy OBSEC.
Right. But to stop an action,
But
that's a cool
stopping an action is
mechanic.
pretty crazy. Yeah.
That is a cool mechanic.
Yeah. The Necrons have a character that can do that, but it doesn't see a lot of play because of its short range and sort of the variability of the ability.
Right.
I'll have to compare the two and see word for word, but I think the homunculus one is better.
I thought it was 9 inches, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that.
Oh, in that case, it might not be. I think the Necron one is 12 inches. And that is the main reason a lot of people don't take it is it's viewed as being like too short range for that character. Now, you also, the Cryptex, you don't want to get that close typically. A homunculus can hold its own. So
but a homunculus is either going to be,
it's probably with a bunch of racks.
coming out with a bunch of racks
right.
anyway. So it's wanting to be in the mid board, like if that's where you're bringing back. So no, at any rate, I think we talked about the secondaries, and that's really for a seasoned Drukhari player, seasoned Drukhari general. That's really your game right there. Can you win can you win the secondary game? Can you bait your opponents into taking certain secondaries that they feel is in their game script, like engage on all fronts?
Yep.
But if you're taking herd the prey, right? It's like, oh man, if they're taking herd the prey, which you're not going to know, I'm going to take engage on all fronts. It's almost like I'm going to double down. I'm going to deny them, and I'm going to get my engage. But at the same point, they're coming out to the board, and the way that I built my list is it's got a lot of mid-range punch with like MSU racks, a ton of MSU racks with liquefier
liquefiers,
guns, right? With a ton of liquefier guns on the Talos, Incubus, and a lot of poison tongue.
Just very reliable poison.
Tons. Yep. That's the whole point of my list is mitigate reliable output.
Yep.
It's just reliable output. I know what I'm getting with my poison tongue Cabalite warriors. I know what I'm getting with my racks being able to take out like MSU and stuff like that, and I have a pretty decent punch with the anti-tank stuff as well. But it's all about reliable output, and specifically it's more like mid-range because I'm trying to force you to come into areas of the board that I can really take advantage of that. So at any rate,
well, and while we're talking about poison tongue, something that we said off mic that I think we want to talk about a little bit is I think some other utility that I think when the codex first came out or when we saw the previews go up, a lot of people talked about the stratagems for poison tongue, especially the redeploy. Mm-hmm. I've been talking a lot about it kind of offline about that utility again. Do you want to talk about some of the tools?
Yeah. So
see that playing out as part of this game plan.
Insidious misdirection, right? So you mean the ability to redeploy, even put things into strategic reserves. I think any good player will tell you you're not going to win a game in deployment, but you certainly could lose a game in deployment. And there are so many deployment tricks that you can deploy on the tabletop. Gosh, I hate myself so much right now. And so we'll put it this way, right? I want my opponent to come to certain areas of the board, and I can use my deployment to encourage that. So if I wanted to, maybe I spread everything out and I've got a couple of raiders onto the right flank and they take to the board, I now can redeploy, bring it to another side of the flank and be really strong in another area of the board, right? Another thing that I like to utilize, and maybe we should talk about this later, but favorite units. One of my underrated units in this book is the Void Raven Bomber. I don't think it's obvious, but the ability, people get really scared about mortal wounds just blowing up all over their army, right? And that forces
or they should.
Or they don't, absolutely should.
Then I guess the Void Raven shines.
It's going to do what it does, right?
Yeah.
But then it forces your opponent to spread out, which is almost what you want your opponent to do in a Drukhari list, because then you can take advantage of. So, but that's one of the things that we really want to do is we want to be able to take the majority of our force against isolated portions of your opponent's army. And Void Raven Bombers, Insidious Misdirection, your ability to manipulate deployment from your opponent, even with mandrakes, is so vital into winning the game. And Drukhari have a lot of ways that you can really get in your opponent's head in deployment.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a big phase for us. Deployment is going to be really key for us and how we play. So anyway, that's why I picked Poison Tongue. The stratagem is great for the way that I like to play. The consistent output is also great because I hate math and just 3-ups on all my splinter weapons. Fantastic. I'll take it all day, every day.
Real good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So do we want to go into, do you want to start diving into like the sort of the list that we've been testing?
Yeah.
We kind of go into a little bit more. Why don't we go through the list and then sort of after we've talked about the list, then go into why do we pick the Cabal, the Coven, the Cult, why do we pick certain units, and kind
Turn
of
it over to you first. You've been doing a lot more playtesting than I have, so
yeah, no, it's been great. So the list that I'm most excited about that I've been practicing these last couple weeks is it's a real space raid. It's a battalion and a patrol. The real space raid is Blackheart. It's Cult of Strife, and then it's Dark Creed. It's an Archon who is a warlord splinter genius. He has a Venom Blade to keep him cheap. And then I didn't give him a relic, but I did give him Ancient Evil for the fight, make someone fight last with an engagement range. Naked Homunculus, nothing fancy there. Succubus with the +1 attack, combat drug. Agonizer Archite Glaive, upgrade her to a Show Stealer, give her the Triptych Whip, and then also give her the Warlord trait for what's the Warlord trait called? Precision Blows, the one that gives her the on a 6 to hit
the mortal wounds that equal the damage of the weapon.
That equal the damage of the weapon. Good. So I feel like anybody who's done any kind of research on Drukhari already knows like this is one of the standouts that first popped out to a lot of people when they read the book. It's very, very solid. And in playtesting, it's also very, very good, right? Mm-hmm. Just reliably getting those mortal wounds with how many attacks she has, 10 attacks, is really, really great. Always fight first because she's called a Strife. I mean, she can even reliably go into some vehicles and either hamper them or finish one off, right? If it's kind of limping along to get you some secondaries or to get it off an objective or to get you that Herd the Prey point or whatever it is. So she's super, super good. I've got 10 Cabalite Trueborn, and I've got them with 2 blasters and a Dark Lance. And I basically I'm using them as just a really cheap, better Ravager. It's 3 Dark Lance shots that are always going to hit on 2s, that are never going to have minuses to hit, so they can be pretty mobile. I've got the 5 racks that I have to take in the list because of the real space raid. I gave the Akathist a Hex Rifle, again, just to help blink wounds off characters, open up some opportunity for Assassinate if it presents itself. And also just, again, it's a sniper weapon that's 2 damage, it's strength 6, it's -1 AP. Characters have to think about that stuff. 10 witches with a Chardonnette and Impaler that are upgraded to Blood Brides. And then I have another unit of 5 witches as well. And all the witches and the succubus have the +1 attack combat drug.
Oh yeah, that seems like the auto include.
Yeah, it's really good. Then for elites, I'm taking a Beastmaster because I'm also taking 2 units of 3 Razorwing Flocks.
I thought it was because you're a beast.
Yeah. Well, and I want to be able to use my Barrett model as a beast. It's just cool for old time's sake. And the Beastmaster, I like a couple of different combat drugs on this model. I like the +2 move to give it a little bit extra utility. The 14 move really helps a lot. +1 toughness definitely keeps it alive a little bit longer now that Hellions and Beastmasters are T4, making it T5. +1 attack is always very useful no matter what. Yeah, a Beastmaster doesn't have that many attacks to begin with, so going from 3 to 4 isn't going to help it all that much, and you don't necessarily want it in combat unless it's finishing something off. It's much more there to unlock beasts and then just sort of be a model that the opponent has to worry about, right? It's a small footprint that you can use for a lot of different things. And then 2 units of 5 Incubi, 5 Mandrakes. Fast attack, I already talked about the 2 Razorwing Flock units, minimum units, so 3 bases each. And those are just really, really good utility units we've kind of touched on already. They're great for scoring things like Line Breaker or Engaging off fronts if you want to go that route instead of Herd the Prey. They're also just really, really point-efficient wounds for things like soaking up smites or move blocking enemy units because they're in 3 40 mil bases takes up just enough space that it can be really frustrating for an opponent. So if you've got an enemy model that wants to kind of come into the midboard or set up a charge on you, put that unit of Razor Wings at the limit of their movement so that they have to stop over an inch short and make it impossible for them to charge what they want to charge, right? This is sort of the basic thing there. Then I've got 6 Reavers at the actual 20-point model cost. Don't at me. With 2 blasters and 2 grav talons. I like blasters on reavers because they want to be able to go fast, right?
Right.
If you're advancing
Gotta
reavers,
go fast.
you want to be able to still shoot your weapon. If you're paying for a heat lance but you're advancing, you just can't fire it. It's a heavy weapon. At least blasters, they'll hit on 4s, but you're still getting some utility out of them.
Yep.
And then they're taking Painbringer. That's the +1 toughness drug. So now they're toughness 5. So that makes them a little bit more durable. 2 Talos with heat lances. And I do give each of them an Ichor injector just for the mortal wound output. If they find themselves in combat, that little mortal wound is a little bit more reliable. Then we've got 4 Raiders, which are all Black Heart for the reroll to hit on the lance. And they've all got Dark Lances. Patrol detachment, Cult of Strife exclusive to unlock the stratagems and stuff like that in the Book of Rust. Drazar is my HQ. 1 unit of 5 Witches with the +1 attack combat drug. 6 more Reavers with blasters. So
nice.
That's the list. I went with Black Heart because of a couple things. It's the only Cabal that really gets a specific boost when you do a real space raid, and I think that's super, super critical. I think just getting that, having the option to flex into Rid of the Living Muse and have that, work on all the units in the entire list, essentially, except for the vehicles, I think is great. I didn't include it in this particular list, but that's typically why I've been going with it. The reroll to hit is also super, super useful. I have a lot of units in there with the lances. I mean, a unit of 10 Trueborn that are hitting on 2s, getting that Dark Lance to reroll that 1 is pretty good.
Oh, so good.
Without needing the Archon support.
Right.
Dark Lances on the Raiders obviously love it, so that's really good. And also just getting the +1 Power from Pain for on the Power from Pain chart for all those models too, including Blades for Hire. Like, just really, really solid.
It is a very solid.
Getting advance and charge on the first turn just opens up a lot of options for you, right? So something the opponent has to think about.
I think a lot of people, they overlook Blackheart. I think Obsidian Rose is probably the sexy choice right now that a lot of people are looking into, which, I mean, it's good. It's really, really good. But I do think you're absolutely right. I love the way that your list synergizes. It feels like the perfect raiding force for a Drukhari army. I love the tools that you have in there, from the Razorwing Flocks, obviously, to the Mandrakes. Incubi are incredible. The Beastmaster, I think putting that in there, great choice.
It's one of those things. I wouldn't if I didn't have to. Like, I want the Razorwing Flocks to open up some of that utility, and you have to bring a Beastmaster to bring Beast. Which, okay, fine, that makes sense. And I'll be honest, that's the only choice in this list that I really don't love. Like, it's the only unit that feels like a tax in this whole list, but I still think there's a lot of utility there.
Right.
She can charge into a unit to try to get them to trigger Overwatch. She can plink a couple wounds off of a unit. She can pick up a Scrabbler. If there's 2-3 models left in an infantry squad on an objective, she can go pick those up pretty reliably. Pretty small footprint, so just hide her in cover or behind obscuring, like on an objective or whatever. Your opponent really wants to go out of their way to like circumvent your army and go plink off that 1 Beastmaster. Okay, fine. She does also do what we just talked about as far as assassinate. She's a 5th character in the list. So, and I say she because my Beastmaster model is a witch, so that's why. But she's a 5th character, which means that all of a sudden they're talking about maxing assassinate. That's a really big draw to a lot of opponents to start thinking about taking that, and then you can try to trap them, right?
Right.
So I think that's big. For the cult, I took Call to Strife. Again, I think I talked about that a little bit, but it's really just, you're always fighting first, which is phenomenal. It opens up a ton of stratagems and utility from the book, which there's a lot of people complaining about having like day 1 DLC. Honestly, like at a certain point in this hobby, you just look at it as more rules, and like more rules equals good. Like having more rules and more options means you're going to be a lot more flexible whenever the meta changes locally or at larger events, whatever. It's always going to be good.
Right.
So take it with a grain of salt. And then as far as covens, I do have the Dark Creed, and there's some leadership shenanigans that you can do in this list, like having some of those coven units near units that my Incubi are charging. That's good. Like, that'll make sure that Tormentors goes off more reliably. Again, I'm getting more of those fight last rules off. But really the reason I'm taking them is because of the esoteric death delivered from afar strat. It's more expensive now, so it's 3 CP to use on Talos. But I've got 2 Talos and 4 Heat Lances. and they can move, they can fly. They've got a little bit of range on the heat lances. 18 inches is not, on smaller boards in ninth, it's not that short. And letting them snipe a character if the opponent gives me the opportunity, I think there's a lot of utility there. Again, it's mind games. It's them thinking, and I'm going to make sure that I mention it to every opponent. Like, hey, just so you know, these Talos, they can snipe that character with 4 heat lances, and it makes them play differently, right?
That's the only thing when I look at your list, I go, I love Cult of Strife. I love your choice in Blackheart. That's the other one that goes, I think that's cute. I think
Yeah,
it's a niche utility play. I don't know that it's the most competitive option
sure.
for Coven, but I do like the way that you built around it because you're absolutely right. If you can neuter your opponent by not having their strong characters,
Mhm.
engaged in the game, either they're playing too cautious with them or you take them out early. That's it. I mean, now you're getting your Cult of Strife in there, fighting twice, doing all that good stuff, right? Like really
Yep.
getting nasty.
Yep.
You're able to do a lot. So I think there's a lot of play there. I do think it's a little cutesy, but
It's
you know,
definitely like a little bit more like gimmicky. It's the one thing in this list that I'm like,
right.
it's definitely like how often am I going to actually get to use it? Not very, but 4
But
lances. It's still 4 more heat lances in the list, which are really good.
right.
Talos are really good in combat. The Ichor injectors give them some mortal wound output. They're
If
big,
you're not using it, it's almost playing to your advantage. That means your
right?
opponent's probably keeping away from the Talos, and that gives
Right.
you some opportunities for board control and some other stuff.
Yeah, and there's some other changes to this list. There's variations on this where there's no Talos, and I'm taking Heat Lance Scourges, or I'm taking another brick of Incubi or additional witches. I really just think like, go if you're going to look at lists that are going pure Cabal or pure Cult or whatever. I think pure Cult's probably the most competitive, and just going heavy into witches, I think, is a very strong play. But
Yeah.
you're right. Like
But
there's
why? Why do you need to just pick one? You get so many
you,
choices.
you don't have to. Why would you?
Yeah. I like it. I like your list a lot. Um, is there anything else that you are considering, like swapping in and out within the list?
Yeah, I mean, almost,
Everything.
well, no, I mean, there's just so many different list variations, but um, honestly, like, there's a variation of this list that just straight up swaps the Talos for a Void Raven. So,
Right.
and I love my Void Raven. I think it's one of my favorite models I've ever painted, and
It
uh,
is a sweet model.
it
Your
is.
Drukhari army is actually very, very pretty. I love your Drukhari.
Thank you. Well, hopefully, it'll be visiting a table near anyone ever again. Hopefully,
Finally got my vaccine
there you
appointments.
go.
1A took me this long to finally get my first appointment scheduled. So
Nice.
soon enough, we'll be back to
I'm
filming
looking.
battle reports and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm targeting May, so
There we go.
I can get an appointment.
Awesome.
But I think there's a variation of the list that uses that as well. And I don't have the Poison Tongue redeploy strat to take it double advantage of the opponent,
Hmm.
kind of maneuvering around the Void Raven. And I would almost put that stratagem, like that strategy of like, oh, they'll move because the Void Raven, and then I'll redeploy. I would almost like throw that in the same bucket as the Talos, where it's like,
Right.
if that happens, that'll be fun,
Yeah, that's cute.
But either way, like, again, there's a lot of utility that you're getting out of these units, even if you don't get to do like the super cool thing that you want
Right.
with them.
Right.
It's still 2 Talos. It's still wounding on 3s with all your poison. Like, it's still phenomenal. So,
Right.
yeah, but this is the list that I've had the most practice with, that I'm getting the most utility out of, and I really like the way it plays. I don't think it's going to win a tournament the way that it's played right now. It needs to be fine tuned a little bit more. But
That's what this is about. The new book, we're playtesting. We're figuring things
right,
out, right?
we're 2 weeks in, so but there's a lot to like there for sure.
Yeah. Well, my phone died, so I don't have my list to be able to pull up. So I'm just gonna speak to it at a higher level, but
Perfect.
it's very similar to yours, like unit wise. So I have obviously. So I'll start off with, I chose Cabal Poison Tongue, and the reason I chose Poison Tongue is we kind of talked about. It's almost like a death by 1,000 cuts sort of mentality. You're
Mhm.
just whittling them away, reliable output, and then also the utility for the redeploy. So there I have a beat stick Archon with the Gin Blade and this basically the same Warlord trait that you have yours with the upgrade. I have one Trueborn squad with blasters and Darklance in a Raider, but then everything else is going to be in a Venom because I want to take advantage of the Splinter Cannon
Yeah, definitely.
because the extra AP on that and wounding on 3s is really good.
Great.
I feel that's very good. And then also I have the Void Raven Bomber there for my little being cutesy there. And then the list really then revolves around Coven. A lot of racks, MSU rack squads with both the Akathist and so basically 2 liquefier guns in each MSU
Yep.
squad, right? And then 2 of those go into raiders. I think I've got 3 or 4 raiders full of them. So I mean that's pumping out quite a few.
And are the Raiders on Poison Tongue, or what are the Raiders?
So no, the raiders are actually they're in the same Coven. So
Got it.
all but one. I have one raider in a Cult of Red Grief so that they
Got
can
it.
get in and out and then do some
Oh yeah. Yep.
more shenanigans there. But and as far as I know, right, the Cabalite warriors can get into a Coven
Yeah.
raider because it's
There's
just
nothing
Drukhari
stopping
infantry,
you.
right?
Yep.
So that was kind of the point because it's all dark technomancers, and if I needed to, I can pump out the dark lances if I really wanted to.
Yeah, in a pinch for sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of that, and then I do have 3 Talos in there with the twin liquefier cannon and the heat lance for the exact same reason. You can doesn't matter what your ballistic skill is if you're auto hitting, and then if I needed to in a pinch I can pump out the damage and the wound output from there. But I mean realistically they're probably not going to do that. The Archon will babysit them early
Yeah.
on in the game. 2 MSU incubi, Draz, Beatstick, Red Grief, Succubus, and then I think it's a 10 squad of witches that just comes out of that Red Grief transport. They're more for utility. They're not really for damage, but they're kind of cute where they can redeploy somewhere, maybe get a
Yep.
charge off and steal an objective. So did I say Mandrakes? I have Squad of Mandrakes in there as well. But
Yeah, nice.
that's basically the utility. So yeah, I mean it's really based around like the Dark Technomancers. If you come out to the midboard, they're going to punish you with all those liquefier cannons. The Talos also 1 macro scalpel with the twin liquefier guns as well.
Yeah.
So there's still some play there. The incubi are really the counter assault with the characters. So I mean the general concept of the list is try to play like I said, it's a flotilla. I'm not moving fast.
You're the Spanish Armada.
that's exactly right. It's just a bunch of boats just sitting in my deployment zone, really slowly maneuvering, trying to get the majority of my firepower on isolated portions of my opponent's army to get herd the prey points, and then just playing conservative. I'm happy getting 10 points early on the objective, but because I don't want to lose the game of attrition. I need to have those options later in the game.
Well, you can't play a game of attrition with a T3
exactly right
army. You just can't do it. Like Marines just have that built in. They're very lucky. It makes them very new player friendly.
Right.
They're very resilient. You can almost just accidentally win games with certain builds, or at least win primary. Right. Secondaries is I think where they suffer a little bit, but with us, I think it's the opposite. We really, really are strong on secondary choice. I think where the Dark Eldar might struggle is that resilience a little bit in terms of holding on to primary points early. So you just have to be able to play patient, know that your opponent is probably going to get some of those primary points a little bit early, unless they made some grave errors and sort of overextended really early. Then great, you can capitalize. And once you capitalize, you kind of need to ride that wave a little bit.
Exactly right. You got to take care of that momentum there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that my list is built is if I need to redeploy, I can use my speed and my range to minimize how much damage I take, or I can put them into reserves if I need to. So like, ideally, how can I leverage terrain? How can I leverage my deployment threat ranges to be able to, again, take the majority of my firepower, make it most effective against isolated portions of my opponent's army, and then just keep maneuvering around that, right? And so can I keep away, play cagey from my opponent's major firepower that's going to threaten the flotilla. And if I can't do that, then I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose a lot of stuff very early on. And that's not what I want to do.
If that's the case, and there wasn't enough obscuring terrain, and you need to talk to a team.
Right. I will say a lot of the community is, at least around here in Chicago, and a lot of the folks that we play with at GDFC have built out a lot of great home tables. People have been really improving in the terrain game. And
there's one behind me.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But it's currently under construction. There's a lot of like WIP projects there. So it's not set up for a game right now, but once we're all vaccinated, it will be.
We'll be over in 3 weeks.
Then we'll have Warhammer from home Fridays.
Yeah. Oh, I cannot wait. Hopefully none of my coworkers are listening to this. I doubt that they will. So that's the list. If the things that I was thinking about is instead of Poison Tongue going the sexy Obsidian Rose and then just go blasters and dark lances, and then instead of going Red Grief, leaning more into Cult of Strife, just the obvious beat stick witches.
Yep.
But we'll see how this list plays out a little bit more. I haven't had an opportunity to play test it yet, but it's all in here, and that's kind of dangerous.
You've played enough of the game too that and you play Ynnari, you've played Drukhari, you play Harlequins, like very similar styles of play, right? So I think that lends itself well too. Like the theory is very sound, but we definitely need to.
Oh yeah, we need to get some reps with them.
Yeah.
Soon.
Well, that's it's a new book. That's what you got to do. You just got to put work. You got to get 20 games in.
Man, I can't believe I got 50 games in before we shut it down by Thanksgiving. 50 games in person, and the sad thing is I haven't played very many games at all. In this year, so as much experience as I had early on at 9th. Yeah, and another kid.
You had another kid, so
another trueborn.
Job change, no big deal.
Yeah,
it's
no
all
big
fine.
Deal, right?
Normal stuff.
But for me, it was like I felt I was ahead of the curve early on in 9th edition because I had so many reps, and then that big pause between Thanksgiving and over the last month or two, I've gotten a couple of games in. So it was like dusting off the rust. So it will be great to test a lot of the stuff out with the new book, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I am one of those people that I mean, during the pandemic, I didn't get really any games in. I think I played 2 games of 9th when it first launched, and then really just have in the last 3 or 4 months really adopted TTS just to scratch that itch. And it is a really, really, really good practice tool. I don't think it'll ever replace my love for an in-person event and the thrill of that multi-day tournament. I think that's just there's just something about that and engaging with people personally across the table versus over mics, over Discord or whatever.
Right.
But I think as far as a practice tool, I think it's changed my regimen entirely. Instead of trying to get in-person pickup games to practice lists, I think all of my practice forever will be on TTS as long as it's available in order to capitalize on in-person tournaments. So,
it is crazy how cool
it's a great ecosystem, and I love it.
It really is. And again, we're going to give shout outs to Roger and a lot of the GDFC folks, because I would say our TTS community is probably one of the best that I've seen. Very strong, some great players. Roger, he took first place at that Northern Front TTS GT was last month with his
last one. So they're currently in round 3 or 4 of a Northern Front tournament. But I think the March one, or it might have started in February, he won with his Dark Angels. And that was pre-Codex Dark Angels as well. So that was kind of exciting to see, because I think a lot of people would agree, they got stronger in the Codex. And he was able to chew through some pretty tough lists.
Great opponents too.
Great opponents.
Really great. Really, Northern Front guys are doing a lot of great stuff for the
They're great. John, shout out to John. He's doing awesome stuff.
No, he's got a big ego. You can't keep shouting.
I don't care if he's a big ego. He's also doing a great job.
He's doing awesome stuff. No, John's a great guy.
Yeah.
So I mean, the other thing that I'm excited about, because I have not played a single game of Crusade, GDFC is kicking off our Chicagoland / it's a global Crusade, really.
Technically it's global. We got a couple of people from across the pond.
Right.
Various ponds.
Very excited to play in a Crusade.
Yeah,
we definitely.
Yeah.
Man,
it's a cool mode.
It is a cool mode.
That's true. Yeah.
So that's what I'm excited about, the GDFC Crusade. I've never played a Crusade game yet. Most of my games have all just been out of the GT mission package, so it'll be fun to change it up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun these last few weeks. I joined 2 Crusades. Again, it was I'm not playing in any events on TTS right now. So it was something to kind of fill in that space a little bit. And it's just your brain works a little bit differently. Obviously in list building, it's very different. And in some ways more restrictive, in some ways a lot less restrictive.
Right.
The power that you can put into an army in Crusade is just truly insane. Some of the Crusade relics are beyond game breaking, especially some of the Dark Elder ones. If they were to be in the actual codex to be taken to match play,
good God,
they would destroy them.
Right.
They were just crazy good. But it's a lot of fun to have a character that you're this dude can kill anything,
literally anything, like a Ragnar, like an old school Ragnar.
Great. You're living out that power fantasy. Through Crusade, and it's a lot of fun.
That's the whole point. The narrative is a whole nother aspect of 40K, which is so rewarding and so much fun to play. And I'm excited to get my feet wet there. So more to come. I'm sure maybe we'll talk about that on our next podcast, or getting more into the Drukhari Crusade stuff, which we didn't even touch. This is just a beautiful book.
It is. The
It's
artwork is gorgeous.
I love these ninth edition.
We have pictures of our relics. There's
Crazy.
and they have an actual, I think this is the first time they've ever done this, just a diagram
Right.
of
an example.
In case we were confusing on how a real space raid works, here's a flow chart. Like, I appreciate that.
That's crazy. I will say these new books are a little harder for me to follow because I feel like things are like piecemeal here and there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I was underwhelmed at first, because on my first pass I'm reading it very linearly, but
yeah,
I was able to get everything in this brain of mine working. Finally.
No, I would agree with that. There's a lot of good stuff in here, but it is spaced out, right? You've got, hey, here's the Master Archon stuff, and then here's the Cabals and Covens, and
right,
and then here's Crusade, but then here's the stratagems, but then the relics are after this. Like, it is a little bit. It would be nicer if it was, hey, here's the lore, hey, here's Crusade, here is, you know, your match play stuff, and then here's all the data sheets, right? It would be a little bit easier to follow, but
well, change is inevitable, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Well,
it's still good.
We could follow. Well, is there anything else, Drukhari wise, that you want to touch on? I mean, no, we don't want to go into like the very specifics of like each one of the cabals and the obsessions and all that.
That's the thing. It's one of those things. It's been out for a few weeks now. There's a lot of content out there from some great content creators who have really dove into the nitty gritty of each unit and some of the combos and even some of the math of the combos and stuff like that. So I'm glad we got to take the opportunity to talk about, hey, taking that stuff and applying it to a list, how we build our lists, our play styles with this book, where we see the faction kind of going. Secondaries, I think, was something really cool to touch on. So hopefully we'll be putting together reports in the near future to showcase some of this stuff.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, because what I do feel, especially since obviously Grimdark Filthy Casuals, right? I feel that beginner to intermediate players can sometimes get lost in the minutia of like, I need to pull off this very specific combo, but they lose sight of the forest from the trees, right? And I think one of the things that our group does pretty well is help, like, what is your game script? What is your overall strategy? How do you drill down and make it all happen so that it gets to the point where you execute on the tabletop? And I think that's important going in. Like, even the way that I like to approach a game, and I do recommend this for folks, is try to get 75 points. If your game plan is how do I get 75 points from list building to choosing your secondaries, it actually makes the way that you play much more, it makes it easier. It makes you like,
it's methodical.
Hey, it is very methodical, and it makes your decisions like, is this going to help me get to 75 points, or am I just throwing something away? And if I'm just throwing something away, like, maybe I don't want to make that decision anymore. So at any rate, we're not going into like the minutia and the detail of like every combo, but hopefully you all found this to be helpful and just getting into dangerous it is, but getting into our minds and how we tend to think on the tabletop.
I hope that our excitement was palpable, and I hope there's some people out there that are as excited as we are and go and start Drukhari armies, because
absolutely, beautiful.
The Dark City, watch your back.
I love. There's nothing like the Dark Elder vibe. Like they just they're the angstiest. I mean, I'm a very emo person at heart, so like I just have a natural affinity for the Dark Elder.
I've seen your Spotify playlists,
right?
I listened to Simple Plan earlier, so there you go.
Oh, there we go. We got some used going on.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Death Cab for Cutie, don't even.
Anything that we want to end with here, Nick?
No, I'm just really excited about the book. I can't wait to immediately start putting more lists together and hopefully see if anybody on the server wants a game at 10:30 at night. But no, thanks to everybody who joined us and listened in. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you got something out of it. We're excited to be able to kind of put some of this into context for you. Brian, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me hopefully going to bed in the near future, because sleep is something I'm not getting. But I am a co-admin on the Chicagoland 40K Facebook group, as well as the Warhammer Adeptus Custodes Facebook group. So you can find me there. You can find us on Grimdark Filthy Casuals at the website, grimdarkfilthycasuals.com. We got an Instagram page at Grimdark Filthy Casuals, Twitter at Grimdark Filthy Casuals, Facebook.
You can probably guess what our Facebook
channel
page is called.
So yeah, y'all. If you're listening to us, y'all smart. You can figure it out. But yeah, we love hearing from you guys. If guys and gals and everyone in between. If you are interested in joining our community, reach out. We have an awesome community that is full of people who are willing to coach, fun folks. It's a great place. I probably spend more time on our
Yeah.
GDFC
Our
Discord than I
the
probably do on
Discord
my team
is
page at work.
Yeah, the Discord is something special. I think we've built a really good community of people that really just want to help everyone get better at the game, right? So I think if you're
And in life.
that aspect, yeah, and I think if you're interested in that aspect of the game and want that kind of, it's almost like that team atmosphere without needing like a physical team nearby in your local area. I think we're really proud of what we're putting together. So reach out to us. You can find me on Reddit mostly. I moderate several Warhammer subreddits. Most notably, I think would be the competitive subreddit. At Chicago Cowboy. I guess it's not at on Reddit. It's reddit.com/u/Chicago Cowboy. Whatever. You know how to find me. Or find me on the GDFC Discord if you're already there. And if you're not and you want to be, message me on Reddit and we'll get you an invite and welcome you to the community. Hopefully we can offer you guys some more content like this in the near future to help everyone continue to grow as players.
And as the great Brian Tabata would say, we hope to see you on the battlefield soon.
Very soon.
Very soon.